channel, Story on Friday, is made with some wonderful stories of Bengali literature. Today, Story on Friday presents you another campaign of Satyajit Roy, Professor Shonku and the Bones. Professor Shonku and the Bones, published on Sandesh magazine in December 1963. In this story, Shonku encounters a sadhu, who can revive dead animals from their bones by chanting a spell. Professor Shonku finds a skeleton near Nilgirai mountains. He comes back to Giridi and starts researching. Professor Shonku, Sadhu and Avinash Babu is in the lead role. Starting Professor Shonku and the Bones. The famous scientist Professor Shonku has been missing for several years. We came upon one of his diaries purely by chance, and published it in Sandesh magazine in the name of The Diary of a Space Traveler. Then I made a number of inquiries, and finally managed to visit his house in Giridi, where I was able to go through his papers and other research material kept in his laboratory. Among those were 21 diaries. I have read some of them already, and am now reading the rest. Each of them records an amazing and extraordinary experience. What follows is one such account. I hope to let you read more of his diaries in the future. I am writing my diary by the light of a Petromax, sitting in a cave in the foothills of the Nilgiris. The terrain outside the cave is uneven, a large area is dotted with rocky mounds. There aren't many trees, except a large peepal tree just outside the cave. Close to where I am sitting, filling nearly half the cave, are heaps of bones. The result of my tireless research, and sheer hard work over the last 17 days. I have read a lot about prehistoric animals. Judging by all that I have learnt, this animal is wholly unknown to man. Its size is colossal. Its 1 foot measures 3.5 feet. Its ribs are so large that I think 2 adult humans could easily live within its ribcage. Its forelegs, however, are comparatively smaller, a bit like those of a tyrannosaurus. There is a tail which is quite long and thick. But what is most interesting is that there are hints of 2 tiny wings, although there would be no question of such a massive creature flying with the help of those. Collecting these bones, and removing them into this cave was a very difficult task. The local Adivasis helped a lot. If they hadn't, I could not have achieved much with only Prahlad to help me. I had no wish to publicize my venture, and make a great song and dance about a new archaeological mission. I have always preferred working quietly on my own. Besides, there was a degree of uncertainty in this particular venture. I did have an idea that there might be the bones of a prehistoric animal on this side of the Nilgiris, but of course I could not be sure. In this line of work no one can ever be totally certain of the outcome. Even large and well-organized archaeological projects are sometimes doomed to failure. Perhaps I should explain here why I became so interested in bones. I am a scientist, my work is usually related to physics. So why am I suddenly so passionate about archaeology? The answer to this question lies in something that happened 3 years ago. That particular incident occupies a special place in my memory, though I have had many a strange and weird experience. It happened in the summer, in May. I was sitting in my living room one evening, having a cup of coffee, when Avinash Babu turned up. Usually, he makes some snide remark or another about my experiments, and I find that most irritating. But on that particular day, I had a trick up my sleeve that I knew would silence him. Without saying a word, I offered him a new fruit from my tree. Avinash Babu took it, turned it over, looked at it carefully, and said, "Oh my God! I have never seen anything like this. It smells like mango. But doesn't look like it. And it's round, like an orange. But so totally smooth. Let me get you a knife. You can cut yourself a piece," I told him. A couple of minutes later, Avinash Babu put a piece of the fruit in his mouth and went into raptures. "This is absolutely wonderful. Is this fruit grown in this country, or has it come from abroad? Where did you get it? What's it called?" I took him out into the garden, and showed him the tree that had borne that fruit. I called it Mango Range, for it was a mixture of mango and orange. It had taken me a whole year to develop that tree. I said, "Next time, I am going to mix more than 2 kinds of fruit. There are endless possibilities of creating new and extraordinary fruit, be it in taste, smell or nourishment." When we returned to the living room, Avinash Babu flopped down on a sofa and exclaimed, "Hey! I haven't yet told you why I came here. All this business of your new fruit distracted me. It's about a sadhu. Do you know the silk cotton tree, just beyond the cremation ground? That's where he lives." "What do you mean? He's living in the tree?" "Yes, he practices yoga from the tree. He places his feet round a branch and hangs upside down. His arms hang down, too. He does it every day, he's perfectly used to it." "Humbug. It's just a trick." It is not that I have no respect for sadhus, but there is a limit to how far that respect will go. My past experience has shown me, more than once, that most of them are frauds. Avinash Babu, however, became quite agitated at my words. He thumped the table so hard that it nearly knocked my coffee cup over. Then he said, "No, sir. This man is no fraud. He knows the Sanjeevani mantra. You know, the art of reviving the dead." "How does he do it?" "Very simply. If anyone brings him the bones of a dead animal, he chants a prayer and those bones are covered by flesh and blood and skin, and then you have a live animal again. The first day, he revived a dead jackal. My servant, Ban Charam, saw it happen with his own eyes, and came and told me. At first, like you, I didn't believe the story. So, I told him not to be silly. But, later in the afternoon, I felt so curious about this Sadhu Baba that I wanted to go and look at him myself. Do you know what I saw? Well, Noni Ghosh had a calf. A month ago, it had strayed towards the railway tracks. That's where it died, possibly bitten by a snake. Vultures finished it off, all except its bones. A shepherd boy saw those bones, and brought them over to the sadhu. When I got there, the sadhu was still hanging upside down, but looking straight at the heap of bones. He was rolling his eyes, and swinging his arms. Then, suddenly, he raised his left arm and pointed it west. His right arm remained hanging down, but now he was rotating it very fast. And he was muttering something. You will not believe it, I know, but the next thing I saw was those bones disappear under layers of flesh, then that was covered by skin and hair and hooves and everything. The calf opened its eyes and sprang to its feet as if it had simply been sleeping and ran away, mooing loudly. I have heard of mass hypnotism. I believe some great magicians can hypnotize a large number of people. But, in this case, even that doesn't apply, does it? I just saw that calf again, on my way here, moving about quite normally. So, I thought it might be fun to take you along to see that sadhu, since you are such a great skeptic. Will you come with me to the cremation ground? I thought it over. If I didn't go with Avinash Babu, there was no way of making sure that he was telling the truth. The whole thing might well mean a complete waste of time, but it should not take more than an hour. So, in the end, I agreed. By the time we reached the river Usri, past the cremation ground and found the silk cotton tree, only 15 minutes were left before sunset. The sadhu's appearance took me by surprise. I had not expected him to look the way he did. He was very dark, his height was in the region of 6 feet, his hair and beard totally black, and very thick. It was impossible to guess his age. If an ordinary man tried to hang upside down from a tree, in the same manner as the sadhu, after a point all his blood would rush to his head, and he would most certainly die. But this man was showing no sign of discomfort. On the contrary, it seemed to me as if there was a hint of a smile on his lips. About 50 people had gathered round the tree. Perhaps another magic session was about to begin. Avinash Babu pushed his way through the crowd, dragging me with him. Now I could see more clearly. Just under the sadhu's head was a pile of bones, belonging perhaps to a cat, or some animal of that size. The sadhu's palms were joined, and all his fingers were pointed at the bones. Suddenly, he gave a loud roar, and began swinging from the tree. His eyes remained fixed on the bones. Avinash Babu clutched my sleeve. Perhaps I should mention here that I have done a great deal of research in hypnotism, and can say, with some confidence, that no magician on earth can hypnotize me. Many world-famous magicians such as Wiley, Maxim the Great, Fabulino, John Shamrock have tried and failed. Once, a Russian magician called Zabolsky tried so hard that he fainted himself. Anyway, the point is that, if that sadhu was going to use hypnotism as a weapon, I was bound to catch him out. After about a minute, he stopped swinging and became still. I noticed that his whole body was trembling. But the tremble was so faint that I don't think anyone else noticed it. Then I looked at the bones, and spotted another amazing factor. They were moving. Gently and faintly, but there could be no mistake. They were rattling against one another, making a slight clicking noise. The kind of noise chattering teeth make when it is very cold.
Doesn't he chant a mantra or something?
I whispered into Avinash Babu's ear.
Wait. Your patience will be duly rewarded.
He whispered back, laying a finger on his lips. I did not have to wait long. A jackal cried out from the woods, on the other side of the river. And, at that precise moment, the sadhu raised his left arm, and pointed it at the setting sun. Then he began rotating his right arm, as fast as an electric fan. This was followed by a strange noise, that seemed to come out of his mouth. If this was the famous Sanjeevani mantra, then obviously it had to remain a complete mystery to ordinary, normal men. It sounded as if the speed on a gramophone had been raised to an extraordinary pitch. The voice was thin and squeaky, the words came very quickly. I could not have imagined that a man could possibly speak in a voice like that, and utter words at that speed. My eyes went back to the bones. I am a scientist. I do not know if the things that I saw next could have any scientific basis. Maybe they could, maybe they did. Perhaps, in 50 years, science will be able to explain it. But certainly, at this moment, all of it is incredible. Yet, I cannot deny what I saw very clearly, with my own eyes. What was just a heap of loose bones, soon disappeared. Each bone clicked into place. That is to say, the ribs joined to form a ribcage, the skull settled on top of the body, the bones meant for the legs went to the right place. In a matter of seconds appeared flesh, veins, blood, nerves, hair, nails, eyes and finally, life. As soon as life was restored, the erstwhile heap of bones turned into a bright white rabbit. Its red eyes darted here and there, for a few moments, then it flicked its long ears a couple of times, before leaping up and hopping away, making its way through people's legs. I returned home profoundly startled and lost in thought. For the first time, I had no answer for Avinash Babu. I was stumped. He walked me back to my house and said, somewhat sarcastically, "You only know what you've read in books. For 20 years, my dear sir, you have handled acids, and God knows what else, in your lab. All you managed to show for it was burnt and injured hands. Now, please stop this nonsense and come and join me in my farm. We could grow potatoes together." The next day, I realized that I could no longer concentrate on my work. My mind kept going back to that silk cotton tree. 2 days later, I could not contain myself anymore. I went back to watch the sadhu at work. And I went again the following day. On the first day, he revived a dead dog, and on the second day, a parrot. The dog was said to have gone mad before it died. When its skeleton was brought back to life, the first thing it did was bite our Moti Dobi's leg. The parrot flew straight up to the tree, perched on its top branch and began chanting,
Radha Krishna, Radha Krishna.
I returned home with a heavy heart. Try as I might, I just could not make any sense out of that mantra. Yet, if I could somehow understand its meaning, it might go a long way in solving this mystery. The next evening, an idea suddenly came into my head. It was so brilliant that I had to applaud myself. I had a tape recorder. Couldn't I tape that mantra, secretly? Of course, I could. And I must do it as soon as possible. Who knew when the sadhu might disappear? The following night was a moonless one. The microphone of my recorder was no larger than a matchbox. I attached a long wire to it, and went to the cremation ground in the middle of the night. As I approached the silk cotton tree, I could see around 30 people still gathered under the sadhu. His fame had clearly spread far and wide. The presence of so many people was most helpful. I could lose myself in the crowd, then pretend to go round the trunk of the tree, as if paying my respects to the holy man. In so doing, I could quickly slip the microphone into a hollow in the tree. Then I moved away, and hid the other end of the wire behind a flowering shrub, about 20 yards away. The next day, one of the locals called Hanuman Mishra brought his dead goat's bones to the sadhu. While it was being restored to life, that strange mantra was recorded on my machine. By the time I collected the recorder and returned home late in the evening, walking stealthily like a thief, it had started to rain. I asked Prahlad to make me a hot cup of coffee, and went straight to my laboratory. Lightning flashed a couple of times, and there was a clap of thunder. The rain became heavier. I closed all the windows, placed the recorder on a table, and plugged the wire into a socket in the wall. What I wanted to do was listen to the mantra first at normal speed, then I would reduce the speed by half. The words were bound to become clear if they were spoken more slowly. If that happened, that sadhu with magical powers who could conquer death would be defeated at the hands of science. I sipped the coffee Prahlad had just brought in, and pressed a switch. The brown magnetic tape began whirring instantly. It was a different and familiar chant, uttered by people who had carried a corpse to the cremation ground a few minutes before the sadhu began his show. My recorder had picked it up. A jackal cried out from the machine. Then a takshak snake. Right, it was now time for the mantra to begin. There it was, that same thin, sharp voice, those same words muttered incredibly quickly, exactly as I'd heard before. But what was this? Why did my machine suddenly come to a stop? And who was laughing in my room? So uproariously, filling the room with a loud, raucous guffaw. It was not something the recorder had picked up. It was there, just outside my room. My eyes fell on the eastern window. Outside it was my garden, and, in that garden, the Golan Cha tree. Lightning flashed once more. In that instant, I saw that sadhu hanging upside down from a branch of the Golan Cha tree. His eyes, filled with an angry, vindictive look, were fixed on my recorder. The whole thing struck me as so totally incredible that I felt no fear, no anxiety. I got up and pushed the window open. But where was the sadhu? He was gone. The tree was there, its leaves glistening in the rain. Of the sadhu there was no sign. He had vanished. Had I made a mistake? Was I seeing things? How could both my eyes and ears deceive me? Didn't I just hear his laughter? His voice had become quite familiar to me in the last 3 days. Anyway, whether he had really been in my garden, or whether it was an act of magic, now he was most definitely gone. I saw no point in worrying about him anymore and decided to play my machine once again. To my surprise, when I pressed its switch, it began working at once. But where were the sounds I had recorded earlier? How did that awful laughter get recorded instead of the mantra? The mantra was wiped clean. I felt crushed once more. That sadhu, I had to admit, did have some supernatural powers. He had realized what I had done and had arrived here to destroy my secret plans. Now there was no way of learning the Sanjeevani mantra. The next day, Avinash Babu came and said, "The sadhu has left. That tree is now empty, there's no one hanging from it. In fact, someone has put up a sign saying, 'To let.'" The sadhu's departure was as sudden as his arrival. All that he had left behind was the sound of his blood-curdling laughter on my tape recorder, and a few revived animals and birds. But he did something else. Or, at least, it was what I saw him do that aroused a keen interest in my own mind about bones. As a matter of fact, I became quite passionate about it. One of my rooms had been lying empty. Within a few months, it was filled with the bones and skeletons of dead animals and birds. I read as much as I could about bones. It evoked a strange feeling in my heart to realize that, in the matter of bone structure, no creature on this earth was really that different from any other. We were all basically similar. I began to feel an odd attraction to the skeleton of whatever being I could find. I even managed to invent a pair of glasses, which helped me see straight through the flesh of a living being and look at its skeleton. It was this fascination regarding bones that led to my curiosity about archaeology and prehistoric animals. Actually, a young South Indian gentleman from Bangalore was responsible for it. His name was Srirangam Deshakakar Sheshadri Iyengar, or Mr. Iyengar in short. I met him one day, walking by the river Usri. He was most amiable. Besides, he was a mathematician and a learned man. It was a pleasure talking to him. Over a period of time, I got to know him quite well. It was in his house that one day, while I was having a cup of tea, I noticed the ankle bone of an enormous animal. It was kept in a corner of his living room. I had to go and pick it up. He noticed my interest and said,
"I went to visit a friend in the Nilgiris. He lives on a tea estate. One day, I was just strolling in the area when I found that bone. I wonder which animal it belongs to. Is it a rhinoceros or an elephant? Can you say?"
"No, it's difficult to make a guess," I replied. But, to myself, I said silently, "A mathematician you might be. An authority on bones you are not. This bone once belonged to an animal that is neither an elephant nor a rhino. It became extinct several million years ago. I could see that the bone came from a brontosaurus. So, I decided immediately to visit the Nilgiris. I began making preparations the same day, and finally got here 3 weeks ago, with Prahlad in tow. By a remarkable stroke of luck, within 4 days of our arrival, we found a large number of bones belonging to prehistoric animals in these caves. They were scattered everywhere. It was very difficult to gather them and put them in one place. To tell the truth, if the local Adivasis had not given us their sympathy and support, we could not have made headway at all. As I've said already, this animal, whose bones are now lying in this cave, is unknown to me. I do not believe that any zoologist anywhere in the world will be able to recognize it. Over the next couple of days, I intend to inform Bangalore about my discovery. There is no way that I can remove these bones out of this cave all by myself. It would be rather nice if, in about a month, a museum in Madras or Calcutta could make room for the skeleton of a prehistoric animal. I am writing my diary in the waiting room of the railway station in Bangalore. What happened yesterday could probably be described far better by a writer than a scientist. But I will do my best to give an accurate description. I have been through many an extraordinary experience, faced grave danger, and dealt with terror. But I don't think any of that can compare with my experience yesterday. Until last evening, I was busy cleaning the bones. It was no easy task to try to remove layers of dust accumulated over so many years. I would clean each bone as much as I could, and then put it in the right place, with the help of my Adivasi assistants. Slowly, the shape and size of the animal began to emerge. When dusk fell, the Adivasis left. I sent Prahlad to the local market to buy vegetables. I was alone in the cave. It was time to light the petromax. The birds on the peepal tree outside had stopped chirping. There was something rather eerie in the silence. As I was lighting a match, I heard something scuttle across the floor. A chameleon, perhaps. But when I shone my torch on the floor, I could see nothing. I lit the petromax and placed it on a flat rock. Instantly, the inside of the cave became brighter. In that light, I could see the bones, so carefully arranged. Suddenly, it seemed to me as if a faint tremor was running through them. They were no longer still. Memories of what happened 3 years ago came back in a flash, making my heart skip a beat. My eyes moved to the entrance of the cave. I could see the peepal tree outside. That same sadhu was hanging upside down from one of its branches. His left arm was pointing west. His right arm was rotating at enormous speed. His eyes were wide, glittering in the light of the petromax. He was staring straight at me.
Jai Vidi Hoinath hit Morakarahu, so Vejidas main Torah. Jai Vidi Hoinath hit Morakarahu, so Vejidas main Torah.
Then it started. That same thin, faint, high-pitched voice, the meaningless words, spoken very fast. An unseen force made me remove my gaze from the sadhu's face, and fix it on the bones of the animal. It was no longer a skeleton. Under the impact of the sadhu's supernatural powers, it was turning into a colossal prehistoric creature, unknown to man. In just a moment, it would spring to life. Even at a dangerous moment like this, I did not think of reaching for a weapon. Instead, I just continued to sit still, no different from the lifeless rock that I was sitting on. I did not even think of God, or pray to be saved. The only thing I could think of was, that no one on earth had ever had the chance to witness such a scene, seconds before he died. I observed every minute detail of the animal's appearance, until life returned to its inert limbs. I had gone to such a lot of trouble, to reconstruct its skeleton. I was the one who had rediscovered it. When it became alive, would I be the one, to be swallowed by the animal, before it attacked anything else? I darted a quick glance at the sadhu. His face was lit up by a monstrous glee. Once I had used my knowledge of science on him, and tried to steal his mantra. I was even successful, to a large extent, in my attempt. Today, the sadhu was here to pay me back. A deafening roar boomed through the entire cave, echoing from one end to the other. It froze my blood. The animal had come to life. Slowly, it raised its gigantic body on its hind legs. A pair of bright green eyes glared at me and the Petromax for a few seconds. Then it began moving forward. The noise it was now making was not a roar, but a low growl. It thrashed its tail on the ground a few times. It seemed agitated, or perhaps frustrated. Then its eyes moved towards the exit and fell on the peepal tree. At once it shot out of the cave. The scene that followed will remain etched in my memory until the day I die. The animal went straight to the tree, grabbed a leafy branch in its mouth and swallowed it. And the sadhu? Could he have known that the end was so near? And could I have imagined that, just before he died, he would give a final magical performance? When the animal began tugging at the branch, the sadhu nearly slipped off the one from which he was hanging. But, even at such a moment, he was able to raise his left arm, and point it east. Then his right arm began spinning once more, and through his mouth poured a mantra still incomprehensible, but clearly a different one. As soon as he finished chanting it, the sadhu lost his hold on the branch and fell with a thud. In the next instant, that massive animal cried out, as if in pain, and keeled over, still clutching a few peepal leaves in its mouth. The sadhu was crushed instantly under its enormous body. What I saw next was just the opposite of everything I had seen so far. A living, breathing creature, made of flesh and blood, turned once more into a great heap of bones. And through the gaps in its ribs, I could see a human skeleton. The sadhu's body had disappeared in an instant, and become a skeleton as well. A sigh rose from the depths of my heart. Who could avoid the inevitable? That animal was obviously herbivorous, it lived on leaves and plants. When it was brought back to life, it woke up feeling ravenous. Hence its attack on the peepal tree. Had it been a carnivorous animal, no doubt it would have eaten me at once. The sadhu would then have chanted his mantra in reverse and turned it back into a pile of bones, thereby seeking his revenge and punishing me adequately. After that, he would have found another tree and continued to hang upside down. I had heard the expression, "I have a feeling in my bones," but this experience put a whole new meaning to it. Prahlad has brought me some tea. It is nearly time for my train. This is where I must stop writing today. You are listening, Professor Shonku and the Bones, written by Satyajit Roy. Story on Friday. Thanks all the listeners. See you again with another story next week. Till then, stay well, stay healthy.